It was a normal Sunday morning in Red Ridge, Arkansas. The choir was halfway through Amazing Grace. Babies fussed in the nursery. Car doors slammed outside as latecomers hurried in, trying not to make eye contact with the pastor as they slipped into the back pews. Inside Grace Hill Community Church, the air was warm and full of voices. Outside, in the bright October sunlight, one car sat slightly apart from the others. A silver Honda Civic was parked under a light pole near the far edge of the lot. Its windows were fogged from the inside. Its engine was off. No one heard a scream. No one heard a struggle. No one heard a gunshot. At 10:18 a.m., as people spilled out of the sanctuary to talk about football and lunch plans, an usher named Calvin Briggs walked past that Honda and noticed something strange. The driver was still inside, head tilted back, eyes open. Blood was slowly dripping on her blouse. That was the moment the church service ended, and the crime scene began. This is the story of the church parking lot murder that no one heard happen. Grace Hill Community Church had been the center of Red Ridge for almost 70 years. Weddings, funerals, food drives, youth lock-ins. If something mattered in town, it went through that building. Red Ridge itself was the kind of southern town where everybody knew every other person's grandparents by first name. There was one Walmart, one high school, and more churches than stoplights. The victim, 32-year-old Emily Ward, was Grace Hill royalty. She sang soprano in the choir. She taught Sunday school once a month. She worked part-time at the local pharmacy and full-time keeping her 8-year-old son, Eli, clothed, fed, and at every practice he needed to be at. People described her the same way. Sweet, soft-spoken, didn't make trouble. Emily had grown up in Red Ridge. She'd been baptized at Grace Hill, married there, and after her divorce, had quietly resumed her place in the third pew from the front on the left side. For Emily, church was supposed to be the safest place in town. On October 14th, it became the most dangerous. That Sunday started like every other. At 8:37 a.m., neighbors' security footage showed Emily backing her silver Honda out of the driveway. Eli sat in the back seat with his children's Bible and a plastic bag of Lego bricks for the sermon. They stopped at the gas station to grab donuts for his class. The cashier later remembered Emily apologizing for paying in small bills. At 9:02 a.m., they pulled into the Grace Hill parking lot. Church security cameras caught the car turning into the second row, then pulling forward toward the far light pole. Emily preferred that spot. It made it easier to leave quickly if Eli got restless. She and Eli walked in together. Eli went straight to the children's wing. Emily headed toward the choir room for warm-ups. Multiple people saw her: the choir director, 3 fellow singers, the pastor's wife. They all said the same thing. Emily seemed tired but normal. She wore a navy dress and a light gray cardigan. Her hair was pinned back. Her phone kept buzzing in her hand. She glanced at it but didn't answer. "Everything all right?" a friend asked. Emily smiled tightly. "Just Ellis Dad being Ellis Dad," she said. "I'll deal with it later." Rehearsal started. At 9:35 a.m., the choir filed up to the loft. Emily sang the opening hymn, eyes on the lyrics, hands trembling slightly on the hymnal. At 9:42 a.m., during the congregational greeting, security footage showed her slip out the side aisle and leave the sanctuary. No one looked twice. People came and went all the time: bathroom breaks, nursery pickups, coffee refills. One camera in the lobby caught her pushing the glass door open, sunlight spilling around her. That was the last time anyone inside the church saw Emily Ward alive. The parking lot of Grace Hill looked out over a patch of scrubby pines and a distant highway. On Sundays, it was a mess of minivans, pickup trucks, and hand-me-down sedans. The church had invested in basic security. A handful of cameras mounted under the eaves. A volunteer safety team that watched for suspicious vehicles. Radios clipped to the belts of ushers. On paper, it looked safe. When Emily stepped outside, the temperature hovered in the low 70s. The sun was high. A light breeze pushed bulletin pages across the asphalt. She walked toward her car. We know that from 2 sources. The camera above the main entrance caught her crossing the sidewalk. A reflection in a parked SUV's side mirror briefly showed her heading toward the far row. What happened between 9:43 a.m. and 10:18 a.m. remains the heart of the mystery. People were coming and going. A late family arrived at 9:50 and parked 3 spots away from Emily's Honda. They didn't notice anything unusual. A deacon stepped outside at 10:05 to take a phone call. He stood on the porch, facing away from the lot. No one claimed to hear raised voices. No one reported seeing a struggle. The one person who might have seen it, Emily herself, never got to tell her version. When the sermon ended, people poured out into the lobby in clusters. Pastor Ray Johnson stood by the front door, shaking hands and hearing about sick relatives, job interviews, and football games. Usher Calvin Briggs, a retired electrician with a careful eye, stepped outside to make his usual lap of the parking lot. He liked checking that no one had left headlights on. At 10:18 a.m., he walked past the second row and glanced toward the far light pole. Emily's Honda was still there. He didn't think much of it. Plenty of folks stayed behind to pray or chat, but something about the windshield made him slow down. It looked cloudy. He stepped closer. The driver's side window was up. Through the glass, he could just make out Emily's face, tilted back, mouth slightly open. There was a dark shadow on the front of her dress. "Ma'am," he called, tapping lightly on the glass. She didn't move. He tapped harder. Nothing. That's when he realized the dark shadow wasn't a shadow at all. It was blood. Calvin staggered backward and shouted for help. Within seconds, people rushed out of the building. Someone dialed 911. The volunteer nurse on the safety team tried the door. It was unlocked. They opened it and saw clearly what the glass had blurred. Emily slumped in the driver's seat, seatbelt still on, with a single gunshot wound to the chest. The blood had soaked into her cardigan and pooled against the console. Her phone sat in her lap. Her car keys were in the cup holder. There was no gun in sight. The first officers on scene quickly did what they could. Cleared the area. Separated witnesses. Closed down the parking lot. By 10:32 a.m., yellow tape ringed the far rows. Detective Mara Gaines of the county sheriff's office was called from home. She arrived at chaos. Sobbing church members, pastors trying to pray with people, children being hurried away so they wouldn't see the car. What struck her immediately wasn't just the horror, it was the logistics. There were more than 200 people in and around the building. A woman had been shot in her car. No one heard anything. Inside the Honda, crime scene techs documented what they saw. A single entry wound, just left of center on Emily's chest. No exit wound. No bullet holes in windows or doors. That suggested a close-range shot. There were no shell casings on the floor or seats. That suggested a revolver or a careful killer who picked up after themselves. The windows were up. The doors were closed. There were no signs of forced entry. No shattered glass. For someone to shoot Emily where she sat, they had to be inside the vehicle with her or leaning in through an open door that later closed cleanly. Either way, it should have made noise. Detective Gaines walked the perimeter, asking the same question over and over. Did anyone hear a pop? A bang? Anything unusual during the sermon? Everyone said no. The closest anyone got was one older man near the back pew who remembered hearing something like a truck backfire around the middle of the service. He hadn't thought anything of it. Later, tests with the same model of car and a .38 revolver fired with a pillow as a makeshift suppressor would show that, with the doors closed and the engine off, a shot could, under the right conditions, sound like exactly that. A muffled thump. Forgettable. Investigators dug into Emily's world. On paper, she looked ordinary. Pharmacy tech. Shared custody with ex-husband. No criminal record. No known drug use. But beneath the surface, they found tension. Her ex-husband, Ryan Ward, had left town after their divorce 2 years earlier. The split had been messy. Police reports documented. One domestic disturbance call. A temporary restraining order that later expired. Allegations of controlling behavior and financial manipulation. Ryan now lives 2 hours away in Little Rock, working construction. He insisted he rarely came back to Red Ridge. Emily's friends told a different story. They said Ryan, called her constantly, fought her on every custody weekend, criticized her for dating anyone new. Recently, Emily had been seeing someone quietly, a man named Derek Cole who played guitar on the worship team. They weren't officially boyfriend and girlfriend, but text messages suggested intimacy. Derek told detectives that Ryan had called him twice, furious, telling him to stay away from his family. Emily had confided to a friend that she was considering asking the court to modify custody. "He's never going to let go," she said, "but I can't live the rest of my life scared of his mood." When detectives pulled Emily's phone records for the morning of October 14th, her final messages painted a picture. 8:12 a.m. Ryan, we need to talk about Christmas. Call me. 8:58 a.m. Emily, at church. I'll call later. 9:40 a.m. Ryan, don't ignore me again. At 9:41 a.m., as the choir put down their hymnals after the opening song, Emily received a 34-second call. The number was Ryan's. She had answered it right before slipping out. Detective Gaines requested an interview with Ryan. He arrived 2 days later, jaw clenched, shoulders tight, accompanied by an attorney. He claimed he'd been in Little Rock on a roofing job all weekend. When pressed about the calls, he said, "Yeah, I called. We argue. That doesn't make me a killer." Time card records placed him on the job site on Saturday, but Sunday was fuzzier. His foreman remembered he'd mentioned having to take care of something out of town soon. Cell tower data from his phone told a more complicated story. At 8 a.m. Sunday, his phone pinged near Little Rock. By 9:25 a.m., it had registered on a tower just outside Red Ridge, along the highway frontage road. He claimed he turned around before entering town, deciding instead to cool off and drive back. But there was a gap. Between 9:30 and 10:20 a.m., his phone registered almost no activity. A couple of short pings near town, then silence. License plate readers on the edge of Red Ridge captured a blurry image of a truck similar to his entering around 9:28 a.m. and heading back out at 10:29 a.m. The problem? The image wasn't clear enough to be conclusive. The truck could have been his, or someone else's. Ryan admitted he'd thought about confronting Emily that morning. "I was angry," he said. "She's turning my kid against me, but I didn't do this. If I'd gone there, you'd have seen me. That parking lot is full of people." He insisted he never left his truck, never got out, never saw Emily. Without a weapon, without eyewitnesses, without clear video, detectives couldn't arrest him. But he quickly became suspect number one. As the investigation went on, people in Red Ridge made an uncomfortable realization. Grace Hill security wasn't as solid as everyone thought. The church's main DVR system had crashed a week earlier. A volunteer IT coordinator, Deacon Paul Minter, had been working on replacing it. Because of that, 2 key cameras were offline the day of the murder. The one facing directly over Emily's usual parking area. The one in the west hallway near the side doors. Only the older, lower-resolution lobby camera had caught Emily heading outside. The timing was almost unbelievable. Detectives questioned Paul, asking whether the outage was a coincidence. He insisted it was. He had ordered a new system months earlier. Shipping delays and budget approvals had pushed installation back. He'd been in the sound booth during the service, visible to several people, which gave him a decent alibi for the window of time when the shooting likely occurred. Still, rumors spread. Was someone inside the church helping the killer? Had the cameras been left offline on purpose? On top of that, a quiet scandal surfaced. Derek, the man Emily had been seeing, was still technically married. Separated, but not divorced. When word got out, some in the congregation whispered that Emily had put herself in harm's way by getting involved. Detective Gaines ignored the whispers. Morality wasn't her jurisdiction. Murder was. She kept coming back to the same question. How do you kill someone in a full parking lot in broad daylight without being seen or heard? Sometimes the key to a case isn't the people. It's the vehicle. Emily's Honda went into evidence for months. Forensics combed it inch by inch. They found Emily's prints, of course. Ella's tiny handprints on the backseat windows. Smudged prints on the passenger door that couldn't be fully identified. Under the passenger seat, they found something else. A flattened, powder-burned throw pillow from Emily's couch at home. Tests later confirmed it had fibers embedded with gunshot residue consistent with the wound in Emily's chest. The working theory emerged. Emily stepped out during the sermon to take Ryan's call. He was already in the lot. Maybe he'd followed her there. They met at the car. Whether by argument or manipulation, he ended up in the passenger seat. At close range, with the pillow between the barrel and her body, he fired a single shot. The pillow would have muffled the sound dramatically, especially with doors closed and ambient noise from the highway and the church's HVAC system. Afterward, the shooter removed the weapon, straightened the scene just enough to look undisturbed at a glance, and walked away. It was a plausible sequence, but plausible doesn't win convictions. They still had no weapon. No one could definitively place Ryan in that car. And the pillow? It was from Emily's home. Of course, it had her DNA on it. The burn pattern showed what had happened, not who had done it. The case stalled. Time passed. Eli grew up. He moved in with his grandparents. Ryan drifted in and out, sometimes fighting for more custody, sometimes disappearing for months. The church installed a brand new, top-of-the-line security system. Every corner of the parking lot now sat under watch. But none of that changed what had already happened. For 10 years, Emily's murder sat in the cold case files. Detective Gaines moved on to other work, but never quite let it go. Every few months, she pulls the file back out, hoping advances in forensics or a new tip would crack it open. People in Red Ridge moved on the surface, but underneath they changed. Folks parked closer to the front doors now. Women walked to their cars in pairs. The phrase, "See you Sunday," carried a shadow it hadn't had before. The church parking lot murder became one of those stories parents told teenagers when they didn't answer their phones. Bad things can happen in broad daylight. Emily Ward was in church when she died. Then, almost a decade later, a small piece of information knocked the dust off the file. In the 10th year after Emily's death, a new neighbor moved next door to Ryan Ward in Little Rock. She didn't know his history. She just knew he was quiet, often gone for days, and burned a lot of trash in a rusted metal barrel behind the garage. One night, after a small kitchen fire in her own house, she struck up a conversation with a firefighter who mentioned that open burns in that part of the city were technically illegal. She joked about Ryan's burn barrel. The firefighter passed the comment to a buddy in law enforcement. That buddy, by sheer coincidence, had done a rotation in Red Ridge. He remembered the Ward name. The tip found its way back to Detective Gaines. She reopened the file formally and requested a warrant to search Ryan's property, arguing that if he had kept anything from that day, clothing, the gun, any memento, he might have destroyed or hidden it there. The search team didn't find a gun. What they found instead, half melted in the bottom of a plastic tub in the garage, was a pair of men's work gloves with faint reddish stains and embedded fibers that under magnification looked suspiciously like pillow stuffing. DNA technology has improved over the past decade. A specialized lab was able to recover touch DNA from the steering column and the seatbelt latch in Emily's Honda. Trace amounts too small to process back then. The partial male profile they extracted matched the DNA from one of the fingers of the glove. It also matched Ryan's DNA from an old DUI case. It wasn't an absolute slam dunk. Partial profiles always leave wiggle room, but combined with the cell records, the travel times, the burned gloves, and the known history of domestic conflict, it was enough for a grand jury. Ryan Ward was indicted for the murder of Emily Ward. Facing trial, he initially maintained his innocence. Then, in a pre-trial hearing, the prosecutor laid out the timeline in chilling detail. When he realized Eli, now 18, would be called to testify about the fights he'd overheard as a boy, Ryan cracked. He didn't give a full confession, but he made a statement. "I just wanted her to listen," he said. "It wasn't supposed to. I didn't think anyone would hear. I thought she'd scare, we talked. It just went off." The judge called it an admission. The jury saw it as intent. Ryan was convicted of second-degree murder. Today, If you drive past Grace Hill Community Church on a Sunday, you'll see a parking lot full of cars and a row of shiny new cameras perched like watchful eyes along the roofline. There's a small bronze plaque near the far light pole. It reads, "In memory of Emily Ward, 1986 to 2018. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted." Most people who park nearby don't know the full story. They don't know the exact minute a single muffled gunshot turned that asphalt into a crime scene. They don't know that, for 10 long years, a little boy grew up not knowing who had taken his mother away in a place that was supposed to be safe. For viewers of true crime, it's tempting to categorize this as just another domestic case. Another jealous ex who refused to let go. But there's something uniquely unsettling about this one. No alley, no dark highway, no abandoned building. Just a church parking lot on a bright Sunday morning. Surrounded by people, surrounded by noise, and yet no one heard it happen. What this story reminds us is simple and uncomfortable. Safety is not always about how many people are nearby. It's about who those people are, what they're willing to see, and whether they listen when someone says, "I'm scared." Emily did what so many survivors are told to do. She left, she built a new life, she tried to move on. Her killer didn't follow the rules. He came back to the one place where she had always felt untouchable and used the chaos of everyday life as cover. For the people of Red Ridge, and for anyone watching this from a quiet town with a crowded church lot, it is a reminder. Some of the darkest crimes don't happen in the shadows. They happen in plain sight, in spaces where we whisper, "Nothing bad ever happens here," until it does. And as always, subscribe and follow us for more.